In this video, I'll show the advanced analytics, monitoring, and reporting that allow you to make informed decisions and diagnose potential issues with regard to your system's performance, capacity, and health. I'll even show how you can replace a failed drive and perform a software update. So let's get started. I'll start by launching the Data Services application from the HPE GreenLake portal and going to Data Ops Manager, where I can view a dashboard with the highlights of all the systems in my environment. At a glance, you can get a great overview of the overall performance and capacity. The performance area has the latency, IOPS, and throughput for the top 5 systems over the past hour, so that you can easily verify that they're performing as expected, and there are similar metrics for the top 5 volumes as well. You can see the percentage of capacity that remains and how it's distributed by storage tier. For individual system capacity, those are divided into 4 buckets depending on capacity consumption. My systems aren't terribly full, and so they're all in the lowest 2 buckets. But if there were systems that were in danger of running out of space, you'd be able to see them in the bucket here that shows systems more than 90% full. There's a similar picture for volumes, and here you do see some volumes that are completely out of capacity whose size could possibly be extended. All the words in blue are hyperlinked, so let's go take a look at one of the individual volumes. This particular volume is 1 terabyte in size, and although the host has written the entire 1 terabyte, only 581 gigabytes of usable space has been consumed due to the benefits from data reduction. There's also the capacity utilization over time, and you can see that a warning has been set for about 90% of available capacity. The growth over time for this particular volume has been pretty flat, but if it were consuming storage at a faster rate, the trend over the past month would be useful for planning purposes. And if you go to the list of volumes and volume sets, you can sort them by utilized capacity, or sort by IOPS or throughput to see those that require the most performance. You can filter your view by system, application type, or even capacity or performance. But I'll just filter for all volumes that live on HPE GreenLake for block storage. Back at the dashboard, I want to point out the Issues area, where you can see alerts of any hardware issues and see software that's available to be deployed. These systems have some failed cables, and I also see that one of the drives has failed, so let's go check that out. The failed drive's data has been evacuated, and it's ready to be replaced. The hyperlink takes me to the Electra Storage MP system page, where notifications of the failed drive also appear. In the Hardware tab, we can look at that drive enclosure and see that it's the first drive in enclosure number 41. The Locate Drive switch has already been toggled so that when someone goes to swap it out, the blinking light will make it easy to be sure that they're replacing the correct drive. Back at the main Hardware tab, clicking the Service System button will bring up the dialog that walks you through everything you need to know to replace the drive yourself if you're so inclined, including a video and the written instructions. I'm not actually going to replace the drive now. That's a topic for another video. Instead, I just want to point out that you can see the status of the other hardware components, including the controller nodes, the ports, and since this is a switched system, the switches that interconnect the controllers and drive enclosures. Hovering over any of the pictures lets you see the details of the individual components. HPE is finding more and more that our customers are under pressure to reduce operating costs and their carbon footprint. And so to make accessing that information easier, we have a new Sustainability tab that has first been rolled out for HPE GreenLake for block storage arrays running Release 3. There's the power consumption for the system as a whole, and you can see how it fluctuates with the workload. Or look at each individual enclosure separately. Next, let's look at the advanced performance analytics for this system. The headroom tells you how much room for extra workload your system has while still providing optimal performance. It takes into account the exact system configuration, as well as the workload and volume types. It's characterized as either low, medium, high, or overutilized, where overutilized indicates that the system is operating at or beyond its limits. What's more, you can see the top 5 contributors to the headroom for volumes, as well as volume sets. The top volume hotspots by latency shows volume outliers that are consistently reporting higher latency as compared to other volumes on the system. If your system is experiencing performance issues, it allows you to determine if there's a problem with just a few volumes or if there's a wider problem across the system as a whole. Zooming in on the heat map lets you clearly see the intervals with darker colors that indicate higher latency. You've probably noticed that the periods of high latency coincide with the higher system utilization. The latency graph has shaded areas during those periods that indicate that there's a correlation between high system latency and resources whose utilization fluctuates with the latency spikes. It could be CPU or disk busy, cache misses, or just the changing characteristics of the workload itself. Clicking on the shaded area shows more information and gives you a good starting point for investigation and troubleshooting. It can save a significant amount of time that would otherwise be spent manually looking for factors that fluctuate along with the latency. As for the workload correlation, scrolling down, we see that the block size during periods of high latency spikes to 512K, which would definitely explain things. I also want to highlight the flexibility to customize your view to analyze multiple performance metrics. There are built-in charts that allow you to examine the top components, or you can focus on the specific volumes, hosts, or host ports of your choosing, or just look at the top 6 of each resource. So, for example, on this system, we might expect that there's an overloaded host during the period of high utilization. Sure enough, the host named G10108 has elevated throughput and latency during that same interval. Next, let's take a closer look at that volume that showed latency hotspots. This volume does display the same pattern of intermittent elevated throughput and I/O size, but you'll also notice some rather unusual dots on the latency graph. Clicking on a dot lets you drill down into a 5-minute interval. During this interval, the average read latency was just over 8 milliseconds, which is pretty high in and of itself, but there were occasional spikes that were much higher. This feature allows you to proactively check for possible issues and uncover insights that might otherwise be hidden from view. There's also a shaded area around one of those intervals that's alerting you to a recent drift in the timing of when those workloads peak. If this wasn't something you were expecting, you might want to take some action such as applying a QoS setting for the volume, or simply keep it in mind when deploying a new application. I do want to mention that some of these features are currently deployed only for HPE GreenLake for block storage. This is an HPE Primera. Primera and Alletra 9000 both support the total system headroom and the latency factors. And all models of storage have the ability to do custom performance reporting. Lastly, let me head over to a different workspace where there's a system that needs a software update. But first, I want to point out that the Data Services application is capable of managing many different types of storage. This workspace has not only HPE GreenLake for block storage, but also GreenLake for file, Alletra 6000 and 9000 systems, and even older Primera and Nimble all-flash and adaptive flash arrays. And when file systems are being managed, you can see the performance and capacity of the file shares and the block volumes. HPE GreenLake gives you a single interface that can manage many storage types so that you'll have a unified experience across your entire environment, no matter what model of storage you own. Now, back to the topic of updating system software. In the list of all systems in this region and workspace, there's a tab that points out that 7 of them have updates available. One of the nice things about doing software updates from the cloud is that you can initiate many upgrades at the same time and monitor them all from a single pane of glass. The list of systems to be updated includes the priority of the release, as well as the upgrade path, which includes any intermediate steps if they exist. For this system, readiness checks have already been performed and they've actually failed. But fortunately, it's nothing serious. It's only that this system has been configured for HPE's on-array migration tool called PureMotion, and software upgrades are not supported during that type of activity. Once those ports are reconfigured, we can rerun the checks and install the updates. For more information, you can always visit hpe.com/storage.